Welcoming you on to the field here at Research Stadium following Oregon State's 38-21 win over Purdue. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com. Thanks for tuning in to this post-game breakdown video. Well, a much different story than last week as Oregon State gets a much-needed bounce-back win against the Purdue Boilermakers tonight. Another Big Ten team coming to Research Stadium, and a far different atmosphere than what we saw, last week against Oregon. We covered it there, and that was a game where the game kind of got away from Oregon State. It turned out to be a game that was kind of a bit of an ugly number as far as the score, and there just wasn't a whole lot of positivity coming off that game, right? So for Oregon State to get this week, kind of get back to work, and you can see that the growth was definitely there from a week ago, and obviously you get the benefit of playing a team in Purdue that's not quite as on the same level as Oregon, obviously, but make no mistake, this was still a Purdue team that, could go toe-to-toe with Oregon State in the trenches, right? You look at their offensive linemen, they didn't have a guy less than 300 pounds, and I think that's why you were able to see some of the success. We'll get to it in a minute, but, overall pretty standout performance. The defense bounced back after kind of getting sliced and diced by Oregon a week ago, and again, the final score will indicate defense was better, same with tackles for loss, turnovers, all that. However, still some issues in terms of the run game, and I think that goes back to, the size that Purdue has in the trenches and the guys they have to be able to block, being a Big Ten team. Purdue ends up racking up, 263 yards on the ground, and that was something that head coach Trent Bray said post-game absolutely needs to be cleaned up, kind of going into this bye week and getting ready ultimately for Colorado State in the second group of four as the Beavers schedule breaks into groups of four with the two bye weeks this year. As far as the standouts for Oregon State, you have to like what you saw offensively in terms of a more explosiveness. Was it perfect? No. Were there times where the offense, we had a joke going around, the media where it's like, just a typical 1977 football game. And, when you throw on, the fact that Oregon State's got a little bit of that option, the old, the helmets with the full Beavers lettering. I mean, who would have thought? Someone said today Jerry Pettibone might have been proud of this group. And, all jokes aside, the Beavers continue to be a ground-heavy team. They, gained 341 yards on the ground today. I mean, you got a buck 37 coming from Jam Griffin, Anthony Hankerson giving 89, Giovanni McCoy 66. We're going to be talking about that in our 5 takeaways piece over at BeaversEdge.com. So more explosiveness. You also got Zach Card getting in the mix with a couple fly sweeps and one being a score. So from that perspective, you really liked what you saw after Oregon State only scored 14 points and really couldn't stop anything this last week. So I think that's obviously a significant growth point for the Beavers this year. And, it's kind of, we flip to the other side, a couple other standout plays. Obviously, Zakiya Sayas, the freshman from Florida, made one of the best plays I've ever seen, and one of the plays that, go check out the highlight if you were here. It's one of the plays I think you may go 30, 40 years without ever seeing, just for how rare it was. Hudson Card just right here to my left, threw the ball on a swing pass to his running back. Zakiya kind of got in the way of his vision. It hit the running back's ankle, bounced up into Zakiya's hands, and he took it right back here to the house for, a score early, and that gave Oregon State a 7-0 lead. And, I think back to how last week there really wasn't a play that the defense was able to make to really get the crowd into it. And with this being 0-0, Oregon State hadn't gotten anything going on their first two drives. That was a huge play. Got the students involved, got the crowd involved, and it was just electric here at Research Stadium for the rest of the night. So I think just a different atmosphere. And as I mentioned, obviously, a lot to still clean up. It's far from a perfect performance. I mean, you talk about the execution early on, going for it in your own territory. Beavers didn't get it. They were able to get a turnover and stop that. But, Trent Bray mentioned postgame, he wants to continue to be that aggressive, and he didn't really second-guess the decision. So, obviously when your defense is able to make a stand like that, it doesn't hurt as much. Same with a win, but something to consider there. And then the other thing I want to mention is Darius Clemens getting into the mix. I mean, the Michigan transfer, obviously, won a national championship with the Wolverines last year, and Westview native coming from Portland. I think, he's going to add something to that room at 6'4", 200+ pounds that we haven't seen since Isaiah Hodgins, as far as just a big target who you can say go throw and go get it. Again, you look at the stats. McCoy only had 104 passing yards. That passing game is still not quite as elite as they would probably want it to be. It's still pretty pedestrian. But that being said, again, McCoy was efficient for the most part today. Another clean game where he didn't throw any interceptions. Beavers didn't have any turnovers, and more than anything, I think it was just, as cliche as it sounds, it was an important bounce back to head into this bye week and then have Colorado State starting, quote, league play, quasi Mountain West play, what have you. Sitting at 3-1, I think that's significant for Oregon State. And you talk about sitting at the bye week, going into 3-1, and that feels a lot better than 2-2. And all the players mentioned it post game. And the other thing last we want to mention before we break here, and again, Oregon State gets the win 38-21 over Purdue here at Research Stadium. Thanks for sticking with BeaversEdge.com. And with something we'll cover more in our takeaways piece. It was growth where they needed growth. There are still areas that they need to grow, but Trent Bray mentioned, post game, that this is a young team that is continuing to get better week in and week out. And you just, I was personally impressed with, there was a lot of down emotions after last week, and Beavers kind of picked themselves up, and as Ryan and I mentioned last week, the very, on to Purdue kind of methodology, and it sounded cliche, but it did, because this was a very different Oregon State team that played here today. Granted, I think, some of that is obviously the level of competition, but regardless, still a Big Ten team, still a win in Corvallis. You were favored by 2.5, end up getting that win, by 17 points. So a lot to like there from that perspective. So again, this Brenden Slaughter signing off from Research Stadium. Oregon State gets the win 38-21. Make sure to stay locked to BeaversEdge.com as we'll continue to have more coverage from tonight's game, including 5 takeaways. You can also check out the press conferences as well, and a whole bunch of stuff leading into the bye week. We'll be taking a look at some advanced stats and numbers along that sort, with the Beavers not having interviews this next week, and then ultimately gearing up for Colorado State to kick off the first Saturday in October. So final here at Research Stadium, Beavers get the win 38-21. They advance to 3-1 on the year, and they'll have a bye week next week before hosting Colorado State at Research Stadium.